Hi, everyone. I'm Mandy Friedman, licensed professional clinical counselor, clinically certified domestic violence counselor, the creator of SNAP, Survivors of Narcissistic and Abusive Personalities, and the owner of Claremont Mental Health. Today, I'm here with Jen Rieker. She is a certified professional coach, a SNAP coach who works with Claremont Mental Health, and she helps people along their road to recovery from narcissistic abuse. Jen, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your coaching style and what you like the most about being a SNAP coach?
So I started coaching about a year ago, had training with Mandy for that. And I'm working, as she said, with people that are on their own road to recovery from emotionally abusive situations. My approach is, of course, empathetic, holding space for people, giving them gentle guidance, sometimes maybe a little more of a push when they need it. But just trying to encourage people to see things clearly for themselves, not convince them of anything or force them to behave in a certain way. So just, presenting things to them maybe from a different perspective that we survivors don't usually see. We always look at it or we don't always, but we tend to look at it in a way that puts us in the wrong. And if you just spin those words a little bit, you see it in a different perspective, and also encouraging a lot of positive self-talk. Again, changing the words we use from I can't, I don't know how to I'm going to try, or I did the best I could, things like that. So
Awesome. And you use elements of the SNAP program
yes,
as part of your foundation for helping people.
Yes, absolutely.
And what part of that do you think has been most helpful for you?
I think it's really a lot of learning the terminology, because we experience things and maybe we know, that seemed a little strange, but we can't put our finger on why it was strange or have the verbiage to explain it. And if you can explain it to yourself and make it make sense to you, then it's easier to process it, accept it, and move past that. So I think it's really helpful to have the terms that we use and the understanding of those terms.
Yeah, like
because it's not something you encounter. Yeah, it's not something you would use in everyday life unless you've experienced a situation like this. So most of us are not familiar with these things and what they mean.
Which is interesting you bring this up, and I'm going to digress here for just a moment. But when we were doing a little bit of research for this video just now, we ran into something that was funny, interesting, but also really scary and really actually pisses me off. But we were Googling just to see, what other information is out there before we decided to record and make some notes and get some ideas together. And someone was on Quora and they were asking the question, somebody just said to me that I was gaslighting them. Someone just said to me that I was an abuse apologist. And a person responded to that and said, oh yeah, that person has been, that person's under the influence of social justice warriors and snowflakes. So I guess that makes us snowflakes.
I guess so. And I'm okay with that. Each one's individual, right?
And I guess that also makes us social justice warriors too, then, because we teach people about the terminology.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And people that don't like that are terming it as a negative.
Yeah.
But it's not a negative. It's just people are tired of the status quo.
Yeah. And we're kind of tired of people hurting each other and getting away with it.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Especially women.
For sure. Yeah.
Interesting. Well, I'm happy to claim those titles. In fact, on our in our office on the door, we have a social justice safe zone sticker. So I guess I'm a social justice warrior and a snowflake. And I kind of think that's a good thing. So
yeah, I think those are both good terms. I take them as a positive.
This video is all about abuse apologists. And in case you haven't heard this term before, What we're referring to are individuals, entities, groups of people, families, churches, that defend abusers, that defend abusive people, defend their actions, and they rise to their defense, and they see the perpetrator as being the victim. I have a video called "What is Darvo?" I highly recommend to go right and watch that video after this video. Darvo is deny, attack, reverse, victim, and offender. So basically what happens is someone is accused of a crime, and then the person who's being accused gets very defensive, twists it around, and then claims that they are now the victim and they're being persecuted by the person who's actually just trying to seek justice for what was done to them. So as part of that system of Darvo, you have people that come to the defense of the abusive people, and this happens all the time. And so Jen and I are going to talk about why they do this, who are they, and just get into it a little bit further. So, oh, and we have Stormy here to help. Do you hate abuse apologists?
Yes.
Do you hate abuse apologists? He does. He can't stand them, right? Those jerks. Okay, so one reason why somebody would be an abuse apologist is because they're uneducated. And, you know, thank God. I mean, you kind of feel bad because it's like, if you've lived a life where you don't know this exists, that's a great life. I mean,
Right.
like, you know, like good for you. Good for you that you're unaware, because that means that your life has been great compared to a lot of other people's.
Right.
So they just don't know. They've lived a sheltered life, and they maybe have never known anyone, or let's just say, obviously they've known someone, but they've never had an in-depth conversation, an intimate, vulnerable conversation when somebody told them, you know, what it's like to have an abuser who acts one way in public and another way at home. Now, there's some abusers that it's just obvious that they are, and everyone thinks is a bad guy. But what we're specifically talking about is when the abuser is a well-liked individual for the most part. And some examples of that we came up with were Bill Cosby, Michael Jackson,
Matt Lauer,
O.J. Simpson,
Tom Brokaw.
And then there was an ashram yogi, famous dude, Bikram Yoga. There's actually a lot of documentaries about all of these guys, for the most part. Jeffrey Epstein that you mentioned, and the Bikram Yoga guy, he's got a documentary on Netflix as well. So there's plenty of examples of people who have been well liked, and the people that support them. Also, people who have been sheltered and they don't realize that it exists. They might acknowledge it exists, but it's kind of like the boogeyman. It's out there, but it's very rare, and it's only there in extreme circumstances. It's the things, you know, the big news. But if it's the neighbor next door, it's like, nah, you know, like if it's a coach that at the school, no way, that guy is too nice, he would never.
Right.
You know, so they will acknowledge it exists, but not to the degree that it actually exists. And then Jen, you wanted to talk about how that uneducated people in positions of power that affect the targets or the victims or the survivors themselves, like in the court system. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so it's very prevalent in domestic court, for the abusers to be kind of protected or looked at as the victim, just because it's been the culture for so long. And there's just not the education for the people involved, judges, guardians ad litem, even a lot of the police officers and whatnot that have to get involved with calls to houses and things like that. They just are not educated on the various types of abuse and what a reaction to that may look like. And, you know, the victims are looked at as being hysterical or crazy or overly emotional, or so many things, instead of just accepting that it is, or acknowledging that it is an emotional situation and you're not going to have a normal response to it, instead of, you know, dubbing us as crazy or the things that I said. But again, there's just a lack of education there. And if people are acknowledging that there's an issue to certain members of the domestic courts that aren't educated on this, they think that you're being vindictive, or you're bitter, or you know, you're just out to get this person that hurt you, and that's not it at all. You're trying to protect yourself or your family or whatever the case may be. But instead of being acknowledged as the protective person, you're acknowledged as a crazy person.
And don't forget that psychopathic abusers have a low resting heart rate. They're very duplicitous. They're amazing actors. And so you can be in a court setting and they look completely calm. They're organized with their stuff. They're even keel. They seem reasonable. And then the person who has endured the abuse is a wreck and a mess and nervous and angry. And it's easy for it to seem like that the one person is mentally unstable while the other one is actually the stable parent. So yeah, education about this topic needs to happen at all levels of society, because they are everywhere. They're in the churches, they're in the schools, they're in the courts, they're in the hospitals, there's the fucking daycare. They're everywhere, literally, and especially where they have access to people. And those a lot of times are vulnerable individuals. So we all need to know about it.
And reacting emotionally seems to be something that people just condemn you for instantly, instead of it, you know, you're supposed to be a robot in so many areas of the legal system, not just domestic court, but we're all human beings with diverse emotions. And of course you're going to react emotionally, and you shouldn't be slighted for that, because you do. It's just so backwards, it doesn't make any sense.
And even so, like thinking back to the Brett Kavanaugh trial, or there was an interview with R. Kelly. Stop eating the microphone, Stormy. That's not food. Stop. Get off the microphone. Cut it out. This is the same stuff you're going to get kicked out for. No more. There you go. The Brett Kavanaugh trial, there was an R. Kelly interview, and they get very emotional and upset. How dare you? You know, face all twisted up and tears. Oh, you know, like incredibly emotional. And then Dr. Ford sat there and mustered every bit of courage and kept her cool and methodically named facts. And it's just ironic. You know, it's just really interesting. That's the whole Darvo thing. But watch that video. Anyhow, okay, so uneducated people are contributing to the problem. Next are the people that think it's normal. And that is so sad. That means that either it's normal because they themselves are abusers and it's normal to them for people to act that way, or because you grew up in a house where everyone was abusing everyone. And you turned out okay, right? Did ya though? You know? So they think that because they themselves endured the abuse, that they themselves endured abuse, and they didn't acknowledge it, fix it, advocate for themselves, go to therapy or anything. They stuffed it way down and then they soldiered on through life. And so that's what other people should. It wasn't that big of a deal. Yes, it was. Unless you are also a psychopath who then laughs about your abuse, which is something that happens with psychopaths. They think it's like, you know, like they tripped and fell. So you have people that didn't and can't acknowledge the abuse that happened to them. And when they choose to rise to the defense of the perpetrator, this affirms their decision to not have addressed these things. It's almost, you know, overcompensating for the fact that they have never spoken about what happened to them, and they're ashamed of what happened to them because they never sought help for it. And why wouldn't they seek help for it or say that it happened? What do you think, Jen? Why would someone not tell people about what happened to them?
Because you're portrayed as the crazy person, or you might suffer some form of retribution from the abuser, physical, more mental, emotional, financial, so many ways that you could be abused again just for telling your side of the story. The shame of,
Yes.
as we feel, allowing this to happen to us. It takes a while to accept that it happened and not look at it as a shameful thing that we let it happen, and more look at it as, this is something that happened to me and I'm going to heal and grow from it.
Right, exactly. So we understand why these people would not have gone forward to talk about their own abuse. But the part that's puzzling is how full circle this has come. So because you chose, for and completely understandable reasons that you would have, to stuff this down and deny and act like it never happened, but you don't have to be, betraying other people that this has happened to, just to continue to affirm your own narrative. That's
Right.
all that's happening, is that, well, I was abused, so, and I'm fine, so we don't need to be destroying other people's lives. We don't need to be,
Right.
getting attention for ourselves. Like, I didn't have to do that, so why do they have to do that? Okay, well, that's a super low empathy thing. It's also, there's some broken things there that need to be fixed, but
Right.
there's no reason for someone to allow other people to continue to be abused just so they feel better about their own abuse.
Correct.
Okay. Okay. The next topic, the next reason is fear. And there's lots of reasons why someone would be afraid, and let's just name a few of them. But why would someone be afraid of saying, you know what, I believe you and I'm going to help you seek justice. I stand by this person who was targeted and who has survived this awful treatment and abuse. What do I lose by standing next to that person?
You can lose the security of the group you were initially attached to.
Right.
It could be protection, it could be financial stability, it could be just the way that you're known and acknowledged out in the world, looked at as a traitor, so many ways.
Right. So celebrity, money, power, gender, right? Because there are certain groups that have more power than others. White people, rich people, generally speaking, males, right? So they
Rich
would be
white
more
males, yes.
power, right? If you self-identify as being a woman, you might view men as being more powerful and holding the purse strings and calling the shots. And so what we call this is power via proximity. Power via proximity. That someone who is disempowered will seek to be near those in power, even if it's voting against their own interests. We've seen this so much recently. You're voting against your own interest. You supporting an abuser is going to allow people like you to be abused more by people like them. But because we're so fearful of being disempowered, which, why would you be afraid of that if it didn't exist, by the way?
Well, yeah, you already feel the power dynamic is so biased or unequal that you're afraid to step away from the higher power and all the protection that it provides you. Exactly. And you see how people are trying to fight back and not making any ground. So why would you want to put yourself through that?
Yes, exactly. So power via proximity. And then we also use the term flying monkeys, which would be a similar situation where, again, these are people that are loyal beyond logic. They would be somebody who would be the eyes and ears of the abuser, and they might present themselves as being supportive even initially, and then go back and feed information back to the abusive people. So, and then there's also just generally misplaced loyalty, where maybe it's someone they've known a really long time who's being accused, and they think that they know this person, and they don't realize how duplicitous these individuals can be, and they're just
Right.
not willing to say I was wrong.
Acknowledge
not,
that this person has a different side to them than they'd ever witnessed before. Yeah.
yeah. Okay, so we had people that are uneducated about the topic, people that think it's normal, and God, that's so freaking sad. And also there's a lot of fear. Jen and I found a lot of common things that abuse apologists say. And we don't have time to go through all of them in great detail. So Jen, could you just fire off like 5 of the ones that we found while we were doing research?
Yes. So he feels awful. Hasn't he suffered enough? You're ruining his life, but he's changed. Be the bigger person. Why didn't you say anything before? I'm not taking sides. It was all so long ago. You're making too big of a deal over this.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Why didn't you say something sooner? It was such a long time ago. Oh, she's trying to get money because he's rich. So she's a gold digger. And she just wants attention.
And it's so crazy that this has been such a cultural norm for us for so long, because I even find myself having those thoughts occasionally and going, wait a second, like it's almost a knee-jerk reaction because it's just been so ingrained in you, right? That there is this power hierarchy and that's the way things have always been. Mm-hmm. And when you start to realize that it's not okay, then you just have to like kind of teach yourself to think differently and see things in a different light.
Right. And accepting that this is a reality. And for some people, it unravels their whole theory of mind. And they just can't handle that, and which is understandable. So abuse apologists, shut the fuck up. You don't know what you're talking about. There's a lot of fear there. And also, it isn't normal. This is not normal. Abusing people isn't normal. Putting children in cages and separating them from their family, that's not normal under any circumstance. So if you find that you're in a position of rising to the defense of people that are being accused of abuse, I implore you to examine why it is that you instinctively believe the abuser and you don't believe the abused. Okay, if you found this video to be helpful, please do me a favor. I need affirmation too. Therapists also seek affirmation. If you wouldn't mind clicking like and subscribe, and if you would like to see Jen for snap coaching, you'll need to email info, I-N-F-O, @ClaremontMentalHealth.care. That's I-N-F-O @Claremont, C-L-E-R-M-O-N-T, mentalhealth.care. Thanks for watching.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.